Political communication is the heart of democracy. Increasingly, however, money in politics matters. A Supreme Court decision in 2010 ruled that corporations can set up special committees called super PACs to spend unlimited sums of money to influence elections. This prompted many citizens to feel as though the message coming from Washington is inauthentic. Enter the watchdog of our democracy, also known as the media. The media is supposed to help us decipher when the message coming from Washington is authentic or simply something representing special interests. They do this through something like investigative journalism. The bad news is that the modern media, a 24-hour cable news frenzy, has failed its responsibility as watchdog. Instead, interactions between the media and government are more likely to resemble this interaction between a former congressman and a Fox News anchor.
I'm not really sure what goes on at Fox is actually coverage, but we'll get that to another conversation.
Okay. Can I have my turn?
Sure.
Okay. Because what he said in that tape is... I thought I could have my turn. I thought I was getting my turn now. Where's my turn?
So, in some respects, you might not even be that surprised to see this sort of behavior. That's why people are rejecting the media. So basically, we see that people are weary of a government message tainted by corporate influence, and they are rejecting the media because they see it as superficial. So why is it then that people are literally throwing money at this man, who is a part of the media and who owns a super PAC, which is that committee that corporations use to twist elections? The answer is satire. This is Stephen Colbert, who hosts the Colbert Report. While Colbert meets all of the negative stereotypes surrounding the media and politicians, for example, he is self-centered, and he is combative, he does this on purpose. By taking these behaviors to the extreme, Colbert helps to illuminate the absurdity of political communication in modern popular culture. So in my presentation, I want to analyze Colbert and his effectiveness as a political satirist. I'll discuss how Colbert's use of the super PAC reveals flaws in modern political dialogue. Second, I want to consider the important critique that Colbert's satire might actually be damaging political communication even further. But ultimately, I argue that Colbert is an educative force. All right, so a quick history of the Colbert Report. It features a character called Stephen Colbert, who is modeled after conservative talk show hosts like Bill O'Reilly. In describing his character, Colbert stated that it helps to have a shameless need to be right, regardless of the facts. But what is satire? It's really important to understand this art form if we're going to critique it. Professor Lisa Colette describes satire as an art form that holds up human vices and follies to ridicule. Importantly, satire uses laughter not as an end itself, but instead as a weapon. So what we're trying to do here is analyze whether or not Stephen Colbert is using satire effectively as a weapon, or if he is inadvertently turning it on himself. My first major argument, then, is that Colbert's satire reveals the flaws of modern political dialogue. His satire demystifies the often vague and superficial messages coming from the media and politicians and shows them in their true, flawed light. A major characteristic of current political dialogue is that there is an overemphasis on the aesthetic. By this, I mean that there is too much emphasis on style over substance. Instead, emotional appeals are used, which trigger acceptance of a message without critical evaluation. Conservatives battling for their party's presidential nomination send out dramatic emails with grandiose rhetoric asking for donations. Michelle Bachmann's Join the Fight and Tim Pawlenty's I Can't Do It Alone are two examples. The flashy graphics and bold rhetoric help to really disguise the true intent of these messages, which is to simply get more campaign donations. Much of society has simply come to accept the aesthetic nature of politics. But Stephen Colbert jolts us back into reality when he satirizes this trend in the following clip. Here you will see Colbert write a similar donor email to his own super PAC members.
Then up subject line, spiders in your hair. Dear future victims, they're doing it again, and we have only seconds to stop them before you, your pets, and everyone you love could experience whatever it is you are most afraid of. And don't forget, earlier I used the phrase, spiders in your hair.
So Colbert uses the technique of hyperbole to show just how absurd political communication has really become. His fear-mongering email makes you realize that many of the rhetorical devices used by candidates are simply meant to cause a knee-jerk reaction and drive donations. Colbert's satire thus encourages you to stop and consider the message you are confronted with rather than blindly following the initial emotions that are provoked. Yet, critics of Colbert maintain that his brand of satire is dangerous. As Professor Kevin Detmar explains, satire is only one step from farce, and farce primarily serves to reinforce prejudices rather than challenge them. And we find maybe some inclination of this in a study by the International Journal of Press and Politics, which found that conservatives who watched Stephen Colbert thought that he was being serious. This is a problem because satire is supposed to be a tool of change, and so if conservatives don't really see the true point of Colbert, then he might be disarmed as an artist. But why do they think he's serious? One explanation of this might be that the group he seeks to satirize is itself so absurd that such behavior has just become the norm. Take Glenn Beck, for example, who commonly acts like this.
Hey, has anybody noticed this crazy thing that we're on the road to socialism? I'm just saying. Wow.
So, does Stephen Colbert's satire only reinforce this type of behavior? I'm unconvinced. One reason is that Beck himself is an explicit target on the Colbert Report often. But another reason is we have to look at the audience of Colbert. I think his main point is to truly convince the moderates that we really shouldn't accept this type of extremism. So his target really isn't the extreme conservatives, it's the moderate. But perhaps the strongest rebuttal is in fact my next point, which is that Stephen Colbert is an educative force for democracy. If there's one thing that's for sure, it's that we're not all experts on campaign finance. But a great part about Stephen Colbert's satire on the super PAC is that he's taken us through a step-by-step process on the rules and regulations of super PACs. And he does this through on-air meetings with his lawyer, Trevor Potter, who is the former chairman of the Federal Election Commission. So, if there's one limitation on super PACs, it's that the donors to these super PACs have to be publicly disclosed. However, Mr. Potter informs Colbert that he can set up a corporation which is legally allowed to funnel secret donations to the super PAC, thus going around election regulations. In fact, Stephen Colbert notes that he learned this from Republican strategist mastermind Karl Rove, who has just such a corporation and super PAC. We get a real sense of the implications to this problem when Colbert asks his lawyer the following question.
What is the difference between that and money laundering?
It's hard to say.
So with that simple quip, Colbert actually showed the power of satire to generate discussion and motivate change. News organizations actually began publishing stories about Karl Rove's actions and credited Colbert with breaking the story. His message helped to amplify debate about the collapse of legitimate political expression under the pressure of money. But we can actually quantify this effect. Looking at search engine trends for super PAC, we see a huge increase in July when Colbert initially set up his super PAC. We also see an increase in articles written about super PACs in October during the Karl Rove satirical piece. So we see that Colbert is actually shaping our political discussion in meaningful ways. In our investigation of Colbert's satire, we saw that his satire helps to demystify the vague rhetoric of political discussion and show it in its true light, hollow. We've also carefully considered whether or not Colbert's satire is dangerous, but we've come to realize that Colbert himself is a masterful educator, able to bring important issues into the limelight of national political thought. Many presentations in my class, which was about art and commerce, portrayed art as the victim of commercialization. But what's so powerful about Colbert's satire is that it's actually using art as a weapon against the corrupting aspects of commerce. The idea of an artist selling out was definitely a big theme in my class. But Colbert can actually take this idea of selling out and show the true power of satire when he happily dons a suit made by sponsored Doritos. And instead of actually becoming a sellout, he sort of sows the idea that it's absurd to believe in corporate sponsorships. It is this kind of artistic expression, one that really generates discussion and provokes thought, that will be vital to the health of democracy. Thank you.